everyone, my name is Janessa and I'm the Director of Student Ministries at Plattwoods UMC. So today we're starting a new series that I am super excited about, and it's called Waitlisted, which means we're going to talk about waiting, and waiting, and waiting, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I hate waiting. I have the patience of a peanut, which is not very big because peanuts don't have emotions. So when I know something really exciting is going to happen, it feels like I just can't wait, and the waiting goes on for like an eternity. So here are some things in life that we have to wait for normally. Things like rides at amusement parks, Christmas morning, that little like typing icon when people are like texting you in the middle of like an important conversation, graduation day, your coffee order and like line at Starbucks or whatever, vacations, and then like for the pandemic to be over, to I don't know, like at this point. Honestly, it just feels like waiting sometimes can be an eternity, especially when we're waiting for something we really want. So there's this experiment that talks about waiting, actually, and it's called the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. It's from 1970, so it's like a little old, but it talked about delayed gratification, or what happens when we do have to wait for something good. So here's what they did. They took these kids and they put them in a room, and they walked in and they gave them a marshmallow, and they said, you can eat this marshmallow right now, or you can wait for 10 minutes, I'll come back, and then when I come back, I'll give you another marshmallow, which means you will have 2 marshmallows. So the kids who were studied actually were studied after the test as well, because they wanted to see, like researchers wanted to see what kind of like decisions these kids made later on in life. Basically, they wanted to see if kids who waited had better lives and made better choices than the kids who just could not wait to eat the marshmallow. So this experiment had like mixed results, and it's pretty hotly debated in the psych world. Like, my degree is in psychology and sociology, and we talked about this experiment so much and debated it so much. But this test gets remixed and like parodied pretty often as well in like today's world, because like I think for me, I could have waited if it was a marshmallow, because I don't really like marshmallows all that much. However, if it was a Swedish fish or a Diet Coke, would not have been able to wait. Those are my 2 favorite like snack food kind of things, junk food, whatever. Like, I just could not wait if it was Swedish Fish or Diet Coke. So like I said, this experiment pretty hotly debated, because in later versions of the experiment, they found out that the kids who took that first marshmallow isn't because they couldn't wait, it's because they didn't trust a strange adult they had never met before to follow through on a promise to give them that second marshmallow. So it wasn't a lack of like self-control, it was a lack of trust. And so like, think about it for a second. Has anyone ever made a promise to you that you had to wait for? At first it can kind of be fun waiting, like the excitement is building and you just know when it's finally over, it's just gonna be like the best day of your life and like this thing's gonna be awesome. But then that promise gets delayed, and then delayed again, and then delayed some more. Soon, you might even start to wonder if this thing is going to happen. And if we're honest with ourselves, sometimes we can feel that way in our faith as well. So while we are waiting on promises, it places us between now and not yet. Like, while we are waiting, a lot can happen in between the now and not yet and it finally happening. Like, we might get frustrated and ask questions and wonder if the person's gonna even be follow through. So can we trust them? Or maybe we'll be tempted to give up hope. And like, all of these feelings can be true in our faith, and like while we're waiting on God to fulfill a promise to us as well, because we might start to wonder things like, can God really be trusted? Does God actually care? Or can God even see me? If God really loves me, why do I have to wait so long? If you have ever felt these things, know that you are not alone. I have felt these things and asked these questions so many times in my life. But the good news is that we are not alone in these feelings. The Bible is actually full of people who had to wait for God for a long time. So during this series, we're going to look at stories from the Bible of people who had to wait. The first story we're going to look at is the story of Abram. So Abram's story is found in Genesis, which is in the Old Testament, and it's the very first book of the Bible. So the beginning of Abram's story is found in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. All the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram is just a normal dude, but this promise is anything but normal, right? This is a huge deal because in those times, having kids was seen as having like God's blessing on you. So when God says you're going to have a son, it's one of the greatest promises that Abram could have received in the moment. But this is also a really big promise to the world because God is promising to take Abram's descendants and make them God's chosen people, the people whom God will work through and be revealed through to the world. But there is a problem because at the time, Abram didn't really have any kids. And his wife, Sarai, was unable to have children. So they were both pretty old and they had no kids. So like how on earth would this promise, I will make you a blessing through all of these kids that you don't have, how is this going to happen? But the couple, like Abram and Sarai, packed up their belongings and they left the land of their people. And the promise of them having a baby was actually really hard for them to trust, and we'll get into that in a second. Because like in Genesis chapter 15, Abram like brings it up again with God and is like, "Hey, I'm confused." But again, God says, "Don't worry, I'm going to give you an heir." And then they went outside and they were like, "Hey, look up at the sky. Count the stars, if you can." And then God says, "This is how many offspring you're going to have." So at that time, Abram trusts God. But then 10 years go by. Waiting for this promise to happen. So I'm sure they felt so discouraged and so impatient, and discouragement can lead to doubt, and doubt can make us do questionable things, like take matters into our own hands. Because in Genesis 16, 1 through 6, we hear the story of how Sarai is like, "I'm not having a baby. We're going to figure this out ourselves. Abram, here is my servant." Servant, read, "This is my slave, Hagar. Take her and have a baby with her." So then Hagar gets pregnant, and then Sarah's like, wait, what? Now I'm mad, and she's starting to resent and be upset and despise her servant because she's having a baby with her husband even though she did this. So Abram points that out. It's like, you gave me Hagar and told me to do this, so I'm confused. But then Sarai mistreated Hagar, and it says Hagar fled from them. I think now is a really good time to talk about how a lot of Bible stories highlight the moment Bible characters fall and mess up, and they just come to the end of their rope. And this is the moment where Sarai came to the end of her rope, because we are talking disobedience, lack of trust, mistreating her slave, so mistreating Hagar, and then there's the whole having her husband sleep with an enslaved woman in order to have a baby. That's not okay on any level. But then there's part of me that kind of in a weird way understands this, because God had promised Sarai a ton of marshmallows. Promises. He had promised her a lot, right? And up till that point, it didn't really seem like God was going to come through for them. And so I doubt that she was actively trying to disobey God, but in the end, her plan did backfire. And so we finally see in Genesis chapter 17, which is 25 years later, they gave birth to a son named Isaac. And at this moment, they changed their names to Abraham and Sarah. So I don't know what kind of promises you're waiting on God to fulfill for you right now, or what promises you're going to be waiting on in the future. But here is what I do know. God can be trusted. God can be trusted to keep his promises. Just like Abraham and Sarah, who waited for years, 25 years, here is a message from this story that both you and I need to be reminded of often. And it's that God has a plan, but we might have to wait for it. Waiting can be really hard and really difficult, especially if things take a lot longer than we would prefer. But here are some things we can learn from Abraham and Sarah about waiting on God. God can be trusted. We don't have to have things all figured out. God knows the future a lot more than we do. God's plan is better than anything we could imagine. And even when we get tired of waiting, God will never get tired of being gracious and compassionate towards us. Because we won't always know what God wants for us while we are waiting, or how long we are going to have to wait. But we can rest knowing that God has a plan, even if we have to wait for it.